Today's Friday Classic is actually a double feature. Two hymns that are very closely related. I'd love to know which one you know, if you sing them both, or if you're only familiar with one. But it's all based around this phrase about the old story of Jesus and his love. Now, I remember my minister growing up, Derek Wilson, used to talk about the old story of Jesus and his love. We never really sang this hymn. We'd kind of moved past the hymns at that point. But he'd say this phrase about the old story. And in fact, when I was training for the ministry, I was lucky enough to spend 4 years at Mclelland Methodist, where Derek had retired, but where I could spend a lot of time with him and really be mentored by him for this role. And one of the things I remember was I would often attend the funerals that he conducted. Either I was playing the songs, I was doing the music, or I was doing the tech. I would sit and do the sound. And I would observe how he conducted funerals and learned a lot about how to do that, because I'm doing a lot of that these days. And I remember how often at a funeral, Derek would say that he wanted to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. And so this phrase has been in my mind for a long time, and learning about this hymn, or these two hymns that it relates to, has been special. And so the two hymns are I Love to Tell the Story and Tell Me the Old Story. Which one do you know? Are you familiar with them both, or only one? And what stories can you share in the comments below of these hymns being part of your life? Please share those. I'd love to read your thoughts and your reflections. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I hope you'll do that and maybe share these videos around. I've already done 80 or so of these Friday Classics, so go check them out. But let me tell you the story of these two hymns that are so closely linked. Arabella Katherine Hankey was born in 1834 in England. And she was born into a wealthier family who were faithful Anglicans, but unlike some of the Anglicans of the day, they were quite evangelical and quite passionate about Jesus being part of your everyday life. It was more common in those days in the Anglican Church for Anglicans to be more concerned about sacraments and church rituals than taking Jesus to the world. But Hankey's family was part of what was known as the Clapham sect, a group of Anglicans in one part of London that really had the zeal for the Lord and for spreading his gospel that was unusual for their time. Members of the Clapham sect were often quite high-standing members of society, and they took the message of Jesus to their workplaces, to society in all sorts of different ways. And Kate Hankey, as she was known, was one who did this. Once she caught on to this enthusiastic faith that her parents had, she began to live it out in the same way. In particular, she would teach Bible studies to the ladies of her age in London who were working in different places. She wanted to teach them about this Jesus and the life that he offered. She also published some books and ended up using the royalties from those books to support the work of foreign missions. And her love for mission work came about when she came to South Africa. This was interesting to me, being obviously my home country. She came out here to take care of a brother, apparently, who wasn't doing well, who was here. And it's said that she traveled South Africa in ox wagons, obviously the most common mode of transport at the time. She traveled around and experienced some of the hard life here in South Africa in those times, and developed this love not only for missions and spreading the gospel to remote places, but also for reaching out to people who were struggling and who were going through difficult times in their lives. In later years, she would spend a lot of time visiting with the sick and hospitalized, and it was this love that she learnt in these harsh circumstances that compelled her to do that. Not only that, but it was her own sickness that compelled her to do that, and that's where the story of these two hymns comes in. You see, at the age of 30, Hankey became extremely sick. Nobody quite knows what sickness it was, but she was down and out and on her bed for a long time. And it was during this time that she was recovering from the sickness, and she couldn't really do anything else, that she wrote two beautiful poems. Or perhaps you might think of it as one poem in two sections. The first section was called The Story Wanted, and it talks about how she's longing to hear the old story and to hear it in a simple way as a child. And this became the hymn Tell Me the Old Story, which has become a children's classic. And the second part of her poem was a long 50 verses or so, which walks you through the Bible and tells you the story of Jesus. It's beautiful to read this whole poem of hers. You can find it online, and I'll put a link below, and see how she tells it. And it was published as The Story Told. So she had The Story Wanted and The Story Told. The second half, The Story Told, became the basis for I Love to Tell the Story. Various lines from those 50 verses were taken out and sort of pieced together to form a singable hymn. And so out of her sickness came this beautiful poem and 2 beautiful hymns. And again, I wonder which one you're more familiar with. The first one, Tell Me the Old Story, is really a kid's song. It became a children's classic. And the tune for this one was written by William Howard Dowen. He was attending a YMCA meeting, and the man who was speaking gave this passionate plea for the gospel and story of the gospel, and ended it with some of the words from this poem of Kate Hankey's. Well, Dowen was so overcome with emotion by what he'd heard that he got hold of those words and wrote this beautiful tune. That very night, he and a bunch of people sang it, and it became a very popular hymn. In fact, Dowen has written about how surprised he was at how popular it became. But perhaps you know the other one, I Love to Tell the Story. And this was written, the tune was written by William Fisher, who was a musician in Philadelphia and a piano dealer. He wrote a beautiful tune, and that one also became very popular, and it was used a lot in evangelical crusades and those sorts of events in the years to come. Let's take a look at the words, shall we, of these 2 hymns and see why they're so popular. So Tell Me the Old Story of Unseen Things Above comes from her original poem, The Story Wanted. And it was 8 verses, which we typically sing doubled up. So we sing 4 verses with 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and so on. So let's look at the first verse that she wrote. Tell me the old story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. So unseen things above, this makes me think of Paul's words in Colossians about fixing our minds on things above, not on earthly things. He wanted the Christians of his day to not be so concerned about earthly things that would pass away, but to remember their eternal home. Of course, you don't want to be, as they say, so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. And the Gospels and the New Testament do present a faith that is plugged into the world around us, transforming the earth by the grace of God. But of course, there are these unseen things above that are the basis of our faith. Christ's ascension on the throne and who God is. These are visible in a sense, but of course in fullness of reality they're unseen, out of our sight for now. And so she's saying, tell me the story of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I want to hear the story. And in verse 2 she kind of explains why. Tell me the story simply as to a little child, for I am weak and weary and helpless and defiled. Now remember, she was very ill when she wrote this poem. So we get the sense that she's desperate just to hear of Jesus' love and his glory again. And I like how she says, tell me the story simply. And you know, as a preacher, I know that I can often get caught up in theology and theory. It becomes exciting for the preaching mind, I suppose. But in the end, what's important is the old story, the simple story that a child can understand of Jesus and his love, and that when we're weak and weary and helpless and defiled, his love saves us. That's what the gospel is about. Let's not become too focused on the theology, and especially make sure that it doesn't distract us from the simple story that a child can understand. The third verse says, tell me the story slowly, that I may take it in. That wonderful redemption, God's remedy for sin. I have a bit of a habit of speaking too quickly. I get a bit ahead of myself and speak too fast, but I don't think that's what she's saying. She's saying, tell the whole story slowly so that I can take it in. I don't want you to rush the story. And so often in our Bible reading, I find we rush over it instead of reading it slowly and taking it in. The wonderful redemption, God's remedy for sin, jumps out of the Bible story. And if we're not careful, we can just rush over it. Friends, take time to take in these messages about Jesus. I'm sure you hear about Jesus every day of your life in your devotions, in your videos like this, all the other stuff that you watch online, all the other messages you get. Take it in, and don't just rush so much that it all goes past you. The next verse says, tell me the story often, for I forget so soon. The early dew of morning has passed away at noon. So real to me, this verse, of how I can forget it. I've got all this theory in my mind, but I might take it in the morning and it's fresh, and by noontime it seems to be gone out of my heart and mind. And so I need to be constantly reminded. In fact, Paul said to Timothy in one of his letters that Timothy would have to, keep telling the people, keep reminding them of the basic truths. And that's why we go to church. And that's why we read our Bibles and get our devotions and all of that, because we need to be reminded of the same story again and again, because otherwise it just sort of slips out of our minds and hearts. She goes on to say, tell me the story softly, with earnest tones and grave. Remember, I'm the sinner whom Jesus came to save. Some people like a very loud and shouty preacher, and that's fine. If that excites you, that's great. And if it leads you to a more enthusiastic and zealous faith, wonderful. But she seems to be the type who doesn't want to be shouted at, but wants gentle and earnest telling of the story that will touch her heart. Everyone's different. Maybe a gentle and earnest telling will bore you and won't help you. There's different personalities that enjoy different things. But she wants the story softly and earnestly to just remind her that she's a sinner who Jesus came to save. Tell me that story always, she says. If you would really be, in any time of trouble, a comforter to me. If you want to comfort somebody in their time of trouble, tell them the story of Jesus and his love. That will really comfort them in a way that nothing else will. The last two verses tell me the same old story. When you have cause to fear that this world's empty glory is costing me too dear. So if you see that the ways of the world are starting to cost someone and affect them, tell them the story of Jesus and his love. It will remind them of what's real and what's important. And then the last verse, yes, and when that world's glory is drawing on my soul, tell me the old story, Christ Jesus makes thee whole. And so when the world is starting to pull at somebody's soul, remind them that only Jesus can make them whole. That's what the story is about, that Jesus offers wholeness and healing and redemption. William Dowen wrote a little chorus that says, tell me the old story of Jesus and his love. But those were her 8 verses. Beautiful, aren't they? What words have jumped out for you there and really speak to you? I am just taken by what she said. But that's only the one hymn. I want to show you the pieced together part of her other 50 verses into 8 verses that we can sing in I Love to Tell the Story. Because that hymn starts like this: I love to tell the story of unseen things above. Sounds very similar to the other song of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. So it's not just tell it to me, but it's I love to tell the story. I've received it and so I tell it. This is Christian witness. You receive it and so you share it. And I wonder if this is true to you. Do you love to tell the story, or are you scared to tell the story? So many of us are scared to tell the story when it should be our greatest delight. The second verse says, I love to tell the story because I know it's true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else would do. So the story has meant so much to me. It's done what nothing else can do and satisfied me deep within, and so I have to tell it. In fact, I just had a conversation with a friend the other day who's come to faith, and he was telling me how he didn't believe, and then all this stuff happened in his life, and one day he just believed. He said, I can't tell you how, but I know that God is real now. And so that's what many Christians can testify to, that we know that it's true. The song goes on, I love to tell the story, more wonderful it seems than all the golden fancies of all our golden dreams. Anything I can think of or come up with, the story of Jesus is just greater still. It's more wonderful than anything that I can think of or dream of. I love to tell the story, it did so much for me, and that is just the reason I tell it now to thee. Why do I tell the story? Well, because it did so much for me. I can't help but share it, because if it did so much for me, it can do so much for anyone. I love to tell the story. 'Tis pleasant to repeat. And again, maybe some Christians don't feel this. It feels strenuous and stressful to repeat it to some of us. But it shouldn't be. It should be our joy to tell of the love of Jesus. Of course, we need to do it in kind and thoughtful and appropriate ways. But is it pleasant to tell of Jesus in your life? I hope so. What seems each time I tell it more wonderfully sweet. I think this is true. The more you tell the story and the more used to it you get, the more pleasant and sweet it gets. Friends, just start telling your story and it'll get easier the more you do it. I love to tell the story, for some have never heard the message of salvation from God's own holy word. Well, there's our motivation. Some have never heard the story of what Jesus can do, and so we tell it. We tell it. And friends, I'm amazed how often I speak to people who don't quite understand the gospel. They call themselves Christians even, but they've never quite understood what Jesus did. Despite being in church and hearing all sorts about Jesus, I think all the different things that are said of Jesus get mixed up, but they don't understand that Jesus' death is what reconciles us to God. They don't know what that means. Sometimes you have to tell the message of salvation from the Holy Word to people who think they already know it. And maybe you need to make sure you know what the real gospel is, that Christ's death on the cross has made a bridge between us and God. Our sin made a big gap between us and God, but what Christ did on the cross was bridge that gap, and so we can be reconciled to God by His love. Tell that story, because so many people don't know it. Okay, the last two verses. I love to tell the story, for those who know it best seem hungering and thirsting to hear it like the rest. Even if you've heard it 100,000 times, if this is your life, you're saved by Christ and He is your everything, then you're hungry and thirsty to hear it again and again. And I love how she ends it here. And when in scenes of glory I sing the new song, 'twill be the old story that I have loved so long. Isn't that awesome? The new song that we see in the book of Revelation that the saints are singing in heaven is actually the old story. New song, but old story. Because all it's about is the love of Jesus and our glorifying Him because of it. Now, it was William Fisher who added in the refrain. Apparently Hankey didn't like that at all, but this is the refrain that he wrote, or the chorus. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory. So one day when I'm in glory, when I'm in heaven, this will be my theme, to tell the old story of Jesus and His love. Two beautiful hymns come out of the same poem, and I hope you'll go read the poem. We're going to sing them both. I hope you'll sing along. And I just want to say thank you to those who support me on Patreon. Just a reminder that free downloads of all the music I release are available on my Patreon. You're welcome to check that out. And so many of you just support me on PayPal as well. I'm so grateful that you support the work I do so kindly. Thank you. Come, let's sing these two hymns. Tell me the old story of unseen things above, of Jesus and His glory, of Jesus and His love. Tell me the story simply as to a little child. For I am weak and weary and helpless and defiled. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story of Jesus and His love. slowly, that I may take it in. That wonderful redemption, God's remedy for sin. Tell me the story often, for I forget so soon. The early dew of morning has passed away at noon. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story of Jesus and his love. Tell me the story softly, with earnest tones and grave. Remember, I'm the sinner whom Jesus came to save. Tell me that story always, if you would really be in any time of trouble, a comforter to me. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story of Jesus and his love. Tell me that same old story when you have cause to fear that this world's empty glory is costing me too dear. Yes, and when that world's glory is drawing on my soul, tell me the old story. Christ Jesus makes thee whole. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story of Jesus and his love. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story. Tell me the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know it's true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story, more wonderful it seems than all the golden fancies of all our golden dreams. I love to tell the story, it did so much for me. That is just the reason I tell it now to thee. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story, 'tis pleasant to repeat what seems each time I tell it more wonderfully sweet. I love to tell the story, for some have never heard the message of salvation from God's own holy word. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story for those who know it best, seem hungering and thirsting to hear it like the rest. And when in scenes of glory I sing the new song, 'twill be the old story that I have loved so long. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love.